I'm really excited to be here. You've seen so many companies and so many amazing entrepreneurs today and yesterday at this conference. And I work at ConsenSys, and I work with Joe Lubin. I joined a year and a half ago after working 15 years in financial services. And when I joined, I asked Joe, shouldn't we be looking at impact investing and directing our activities towards more social impact? And his answer was, well, Vanessa, aren't we just doing impact by just creating the ecosystem? We're building this new technology that has tremendous impact. Isn't that enough? And I said, yes, that's fantastic, but maybe we can add some intentionality towards people who are underserved, specific problems we want to solve in the world. And this is what I want to talk to you about. So we, at ConsenSys, we have a very big activity in social impact. We also manage the Blockchain for Social Impact Coalition, which federates a lot of NGOs, other social entrepreneurs, companies, and technologists. So with further delay, why did we choose to go to Blockchain for Social Impact? Today, this is the world we live in. There's 2.7 billion people living with less than $2.5 a day. 1 out of 7 people does not have an identity. There's 65 million people displaced, including 20 million refugees. That means people living in camps for more than 20 years. We have 40 million people who are victims of sex trafficking or forced labor or forced marriages. And 1 out of 7 people in the world is malnourished. So with the tremendous wealth that we created in the blockchain space, the question is, what can we do to help the underserved? Is there a way for us to use this technology for betterment of the world? As Joe was saying, blockchain at its core is impactful. It's a radical, competence-destroying, and disruptive architectural innovation. We all hope that decentralization, peer-to-peer exchange of value will accelerate settlement times, lower the cost of transactions, cut out the middlemen, and lower barriers to capital and information. And this across the industry, whether it's financial services or just general manufacturing, et cetera. When we look at social impact, we're dealing with populations that need solutions immediately. So we have the choice of going 2 ways. We can do incremental change via the technology, or we can really do system radical change. So by incremental change, I mean really enhancing existing solutions, increasing efficiency and transparency. And the risk of this is that we're using the legacy systems. And that's a risk that we're seeing also in the financial services, where people try to better the existing solutions when we should be looking at really transforming the system. In the system's radical changes, it disallows for new business models, leapfrogging opportunities, especially in emerging markets, but it's difficult to implement at a wider scale. And sometimes you need to work with governments and work with the incumbents that you want to disrupt. So for example, self-sovereign identity or things related to property rights, which are one of the issues that the underserved populations face. It's really hard to not work with the governments and other institutions that have big skin in the game. Same thing for energy. You want to leapfrog the incumbents and the grids. It's either you work with them or you create a new solution. So my conclusion with Joe was that intentionality matters, and there are some projects which we can direct and we can create to solve these problems. If you know the UN Sustainable Development Goals, they cover about every problem in the world right now, whether it's energy, supporting women, or alleviating poverty. So if you have those goals in mind, you can actually create new businesses to solve these problems. And what's really key when you work with these types of issues, and that's our experience at ConsenSys, is that you really need to work with the people on the ground, work with the NGOs who know what the issues are, work with the people who are suffering from the problems. If you're working on a refugee solution, integrate a refugee in your team, and this will make you successful. So it's a very specific way of working, which is more based on human design and human-centered design than any other blockchain solutions. So when we created the blockchain for Social Impact Coalition, we asked our members, we have over 50 members, which are the largest NGOs, what sectors do you think have the most impact? And they came up with 4 sectors. This is the members who are in our coalition. The target sectors where people think blockchain will have the most impacts are identity and vulnerable populations, financial inclusion, supply chain, energy and environment. And most recently, RippleWorks issued a study with Stanford where they found that energy and healthcare and payment systems were the issues that most of the companies are gearing towards to solving these problems. So in identity and vulnerable populations, self-sovereign identity is key. As I said, 1 out of 7 people in the world don't have identities. So how do they have access to services? How do they have access to banking institutions? It's one more hurdle for them to really develop. We also work with refugees. There's a lot of projects that want to help identify refugees, and I'll speak to one of them a little bit later. Financial inclusion is key. Currently, credit rating systems are broken. They leave a lot of people outside that can't have access to banking infrastructure. The remittance space is ripping off people with 7% fees on average. So you can imagine that people who are sending money back to their families who are already on a tight budget, taking out 7% of fees is huge. So the remittance space is very interesting and is developing. On the supply chain side, supply chains are tainted often with forced labor, human trafficking. There's issues around provenance, and bringing transparency into the supply chain is something that a lot of people focus, so that the economic balance also between the workers or, for example, the farmers or the producers can be rebalanced through a transparent system. On the energy and environment, I think it's a very exciting space, and you've seen a presentation I think a few minutes ago about one of the companies. There's a lot of projects regarding off-grid energy, peer-to-peer trading, really leapfrogging the incumbent grids and organizations. So those were the 4 first sectors we worked on, but other emerged during this year, which I think I want to bring to your attention because it's really interesting developments. So human rights activists, democracy, decentralized governments, enhancing philanthropy and equal justice are themes that people are really, really working on, and there's a lot of projects. So when you're a human rights activist, you need security, of your location. You need security of the information that you're sending to other people. You need security on the funding you receive, so that governments or other opponents who are guilty, I would say, of human rights violations cannot have the information about what you're doing. So there's a lot of projects which are not all public about security and information. On the democracy and decentralized governments, everyone is trying to figure out how to get better voting systems that are incorruptible, and also to solve the issues of fake news and create liquid democracy mechanisms where people can vote directly on specific issues and have a more granular decision-making process. On the philanthropy side, a lot of a lot of the large NGOs and charities want to show transparency to their donors. Right now there's a crisis in terms of the donors don't really know what their money is really used for. So basically when you donate to a large charity, you give, let's say you give $100,000, and then at the end of the year you get a report about what the charity has done. What blockchain allows you to do is to follow your donation throughout the journey and also direct it towards specific projects of the charity and see and measure the results in a much more transparent way. So there's a lot of projects in that space. There's also projects around donation in crypto, which is growing, and I think that's going to be a really active area because people want to donate. They just need avenues in order for them to do so. They need charities to create mechanisms by which they can receive donations in crypto, and I think that's really key. Equal justice is the last one. Due process, managing evidence, working with the criminal justice systems is something that will bring transparency and hopefully equality in our society. So I'll just go through, I have 3 minutes left, so I'll go through a few use cases which are my favorite, which I don't endorse or that ConsenSys doesn't endorse, but I think are great use cases. For identity and vulnerable population, there's a project in Moldova for sex trafficking. So they have a very high rate of people who are victims of sex trafficking in Moldova, and they're hoping that through a self-sovereign identity, there will be, the Moldova government will be able to monitor populations at risk, and that they will not be able to cross the border with fake documents, etc. On the WFP side, the World Food Program, they created an amazing project for refugees in Jordan. Previously, the UNHCR identifies all the refugees through their iris. So they have a unique identifier, and they can get food in supermarkets, and they have a certain amount allocated to each month. What was happening is that the World Food Program was sending each month, 1 month in advance, monies to a Jordanian bank, and then we're paying a huge fees to that bank. And by putting a blockchain mechanism, they basically cut out the bank and also and the fees, but also reduced the reconciliation rate by 90% because there were some errors in reconciliation because there was an intermediary. So this is a pretty exciting program, and they're expanding it, and hopefully it will make the World Food Program more efficient. On the energy and environment, you've seen an example earlier today. Peer-to-peer trading is really exciting with the development of renewable energies and solar panels and reducing the cost and empowering people to manage their energy. On the supply chain, these are 2 examples. One is sustainable fisheries, which is also prone to a lot of forced laborers and sex trafficking. And basically, we created a solution with the World Wildlife Fund where you're able to tag the tuna when it's caught and trace the tuna up to the final consumer, so that provenance is guaranteed, and that also the fishers are also promised a little better solution. On human rights and democracy, I'm going to give one last example. There's something called Democracy Earth. Some of you might have heard it. It's a governance platform, and they are, during the peace process in Colombia, they created a special voting mechanisms for expats. During that peace process, expats did not have any say in the voting because they could not vote. So they created this blockchain solution for them to vote and to take into account their feedback. It wasn't an official vote, but at least it was a vote that was guaranteed in terms of security and identity. So with this, I only have 3 seconds left. I'll leave you, with one question. What do you want to do with all this wealth that we've created? How do you want to direct your energy? How do you want to spend your time? If social impact is something that you care about, there's a lot of opportunities to, at the same time, make money and have huge impact. Thank you.